Well, hello, everybody. My name is Chris Barton.
And I'm Jennifer Ziegler.
And we both write books for young people, and we love talking with other authors of books for young people about the dedications in their books. That's what this one's dedicated to is all about. Today, we're talking with our friend Minh Lê about the dedication in his book, Drawn Together, illustrated by Dan Santat. Hello, Minh. How are you?
Hello, how are you doing? Thanks so much for having me.
Well, welcome. We're so excited to be talking to you. Would you start by please reading aloud the dedication?
I would be happy to. So here's the dedication right here. And mine is for my grandparents and everything we left unsaid, and for my editor, Rotem, who helps me find the right words. And you'll see that Dan also dedicated to his grandmother. So we have a picture of my grandfather on one side and his grandmother on the other side.
Oh, that's special. Would you mind telling us a little bit about these wonderful people that you dedicated the book to and why?
Yeah, sure. Drawn Together is a very personal story for me because it's about a boy and his grandfather who struggled to communicate because of a language gap, right? And it's very personal because that was my experience growing up. My grandparents spoke mostly Vietnamese and I spoke mostly English. So I would go over there a lot and we loved each other so much, but at the same time, we didn't know how to express that in words. So there's scenes in the book where the grandfather and grandson are sitting like right next to each other on the couch and like they're physically so close, but at the same time, they're like worlds apart and they just don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to connect. So for me, when it says like, to my grandparents and everything we left unsaid, it kind of has dual meanings of like, there's so much that I didn't know how to say to them and they didn't know how to say to me. But at the same time, that relationship was deeper than words. And there was no doubt in my mind how we felt about each other, even though we didn't know how to always express that.
So did you know just from the get-go with this idea, the inception of the idea that you would dedicate it to all three of them, or was there a moment when you realized?
No, I think I knew early on because it was so personal. I included a picture of my grandfather because it's dedicated to all my grandparents, but it's particularly about that relationship with my grandfather. And if if you're okay with getting a little bit like super personal, so he knew I was working on a book, right? But it's about a boy and a grandfather who don't know how to communicate, who don't know how to express themselves through words. So like I very literally did not know how to tell him about this story, right? About the book itself. So my hope was to be able to hand the book to him when it was done and share it with him that way. And because it's such a visual story, be able to express myself and my feelings on our relationship through the book. It was very literally like the book was going to be how I made that connection. Unfortunately, he got sick while the book was still being made. And actually the day that I got, or like the week that I got the first round of sketches from Dan, I got a call from my parents that my grandfather got sick and was in the hospital. He was actually in a coma. So I printed out what I had then, and I put together like this little like makeshift copy of the book with all the sketches in it and went up to see him in the hospital and read it to him while he was in the hospital, but he was not conscious. And unfortunately, he never emerged from the coma. And my hope is that he was able to experience that on some level there, but I'll always live with that regret of like not finding it within myself to figure out how to tell him about the story, right? One of the saving graces of the having the book out there is that even though he's not around anymore, in the year following his passing, I was out so much talking to kids, talking to teachers, and sharing our story. And so in a lot of ways, he was as present within that time as he ever was. And he's like part of like the fabric of my day in a lot of ways. And then when I would talk to kids and like do readings and people would come up to me afterwards and say, it's such a beautiful story. It makes me want to call my grandparents and seeing other people or seeing this book inspire people to make that connection that I wasn't always able to make during our time together was is hopefully something that I think is a way of honoring that relationship moving forward.
And how about Rotem's role in telling this story? It's a pretty strong indication of how much you value her input into this book, that you would dedicate the book to her as well as your grandparents.
Dan had just won the Caldecott for The Adventures of Beagle. And Rotem had worked with him on a previous book, so she took him out to celebrate. And apparently while they were out, she said, I just did this book with Min, who's this new author, and I think you two would make a great team. And Dan was like, sure, have him send me some ideas. So she was very much the matchmaker behind all this and pulled the team together. Because I got a call or an email from my agent that night saying, we have a chance to work with Dan Santat. You need to send me 2 to 3 book ideas within the next 2 days, because his life is about to go on this like whirlwind Caldecott tour, and we have to strike while we have the opportunity. So my wife and I had just come back from the hospital with our second son. So I have a very clear memory of being up at 3 a.m., rocking this newborn to sleep and being like, how do you come up with a book idea for someone who just won the freaking Caldecott? And thankfully this is the story that came about. And I think being in that mindset of like having a newborn, thinking about family and legacy and tradition and all that, and was kind of how this idea came about. So yeah, Rotem is the best editor. She's great, and she very much made this book happen. So it only felt appropriate to dedicate it to her as well.
Were there other members of your family that you wanted to make sure saw or knew about the dedication to your grandparents?
A moment that really meant a lot is when we first got the book, so the physical copy of the book. I was sitting on the couch with my wife and 2 sons, and this is like years ago. And my grandfather had just recently passed. And great grandfather in Vietnamese is Om Ko. So we opened up the book, and my youngest, who was maybe 3 at the time, sees the picture and he's like, oh, it's Uncle, and he's smiling at me. I was just like, my wife and I are just like in tears, like, oh. So just like the idea that that this book is now on the shelf and that people can not only come and read this story, but see his smiling face. To me, as someone who grew up around books and who wants to spend his life around books, is the ultimate dedication, the ultimate way of honoring him and the rest of my grandparents.
Well, and I really admire your practice of reading the dedication as part of your presentations. I feel like it works better when the dedication is at the beginning of the book than when it's on the last page, because otherwise you get to the last page and it's ta-da! Oh, here's this other thing I got to pause and do. So I now have a clear preference for dedication pages that come before the story.
It's like on Netflix when the credits come, but then they already queue you up for the next thing to watch, so you're not paying attention anymore.
Right, exactly. Or they cut them off entirely.